أيها المؤتمر الكريم، صدى المؤتمر الآن في الفقرة التالية يحدثنا سعادة الأستاذ الدكتور كانوك وونترانغان مستشار عميد كلية الدراسات الإسلامية بجامعة الأمير سونكلا تحت عنوان انعكاس في القيم الإسلامية والمشكلات العالمية المعاصرة، فليتفضل مشكورا.
His Excellency Sheikh Umar Ubaid Hassana, His Excellency Tansi Professor Dr. Muhammad Kamal Hassan, Associate Professor Dr. Chu Saklim Sukun, President Prince of Songkla University, Dr. Yusuf Talek, Dean of Islamic Studies College, Prince of Songkla Universities, Excellencies, distinguished scholars, ladies and gentlemen, as a non-Muslim, when I read the Quran and academic writings of Islamic scholars, I found so many excellent concepts and principles on utility functions of a good life, social and ethical values, justice, righteousness, peace, and more importantly, beauty of Islam. I have to confess that I have been impressed by the Al-Fatiha, verse 6, quote, "Guide us to the straight path. Itina Sirat al-Mustaqim." This principle is further elaborated in the Al-Baqarah, verse 143, quote, "I have made you a middle way community. Wakasa liga ya'anakum ummatan wasaton." This implies that Islam represents the middle way in all aspects of life. This wasatiyya means virtue, excellence, justice, regardless of space and time. To my understanding, the Quran has established key principles to balance every aspect of life in various living conditions. I see the relationship and interconnection between these two important principles, namely Sirat al-Mustaqim and al-Wasatiyah. In other words, we use Wasatiyah as an approach to the straight path. On the one hand, Allah established inviolable rights of individuals, namely life or blood, honor, property, home, and belief. These inviolable rights apply not only between Muslim and Muslim, but also between Muslim and non-Muslims. On the other hand, these basic rights imply that Muslim and non-Muslim are not by nature an enemy to each other, and they could live in peaceful coexistence. Thus, we should not use any social or historical excuses to push us away from the Wasatiyah as the principles of living conducts on the straight path towards Allah. These inviolable rights serve as a binding principle between individuals and their community. In other words, Allah gives individual rights which everyone, Muslim and non-Muslim, has to respect. And Allah also gives duties and individual responsibilities to establish stability, security, justice, peace, and harmony of human society. May I recall two important Islamic conferences. First, the conference in Amman, Jordan, in 2005, which endorsed an important message called the Amman Message. The second conference in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, in 2015, which adopted the Mecca Proclamation. The two vital conferences surely indicate serious concern on contemporary conflicts, violence, injustice, racism, extremism, and terrorism in this global community. We cannot deny that extremism and terrorism are our global problems. The Amman Message calls for fairness, moderation, mutual forgiveness, compassion, and engagement of dialogue with each other, particularly among Muslims. The message calls for, quote, casting aside disagreement between Muslims and unify their words and stands, reaffirming their mutual respect for each other, fortifying mutual affinity among their people and states, strengthening the tie of brotherhoods which unite them in the mutual love of Allah. And we call upon Muslims not to permit discord and outside interference between them, unquote. Since 2005, the development of peace and unity of the Muslim Ummah did not make much as progress as expected by the Amman Message. As a result, 10 years later, in 2015, another important conference was called to invite world Islamic leaders and scholars to meet in Mecca to discuss engaging issues of the crisis, so-called Islam and counter-terrorism. At the opening of the conference, His Royal Highness Prince Khalid Al Faisal Al Saud praised the Muslim World League for, quote, its endeavor to refute suspicious and falsehoods leveled against Islam and its civilization and holy places, and in countering terrorism, extremism, and fanaticism, unquote. This communique indicates serious concerns of Muslim world over Islam and its perceived image of connection with terrorism. The Mecca Proclamation endorsed many recommendations concerning Muslim countries, religious institutions and scholars, education institutions and media, families and community, as well as the Muslim World League, to join hands and work to end terrorism and bring back the correct understanding of Islam and its civilization. One common agenda of all institutions is education for young people. The proclamation emphasizes the values of nurturing the young according to the teaching of Allah and living patterns of the Prophet Muhammad. These two important global conferences and their resolutions forced me to ask some critical questions to those who believe and practice Islam, as well as non-Muslim. First, Do they really believe in peace? Second, do they really intend to end their engaging conflicts? And third, do they really wish to establish a peaceful coexistence? To my humble and limited understanding on Islam, peace is a fundamental value and goal of Islam and the Muslim Ummah. However, among Muslims and between Muslim and non-Muslims, conflict, violence, and fighting still remain intensified today. Therefore, we need to ask ourselves about our belief in Islam and our Islamic practices in these contemporary circumstances. As the Amman Message warned us to return to, quote, the true nature of Islam and the nature of true Islam, unquote. At this point, I would like to call for your attention that we need to urgently return to our religious and educational institutions and reform our school curriculum and upgrade our teaching quality. This education reform must be our common agenda throughout the world. Excellencies, distinguished scholars, ladies and gentlemen, according to my studies of Islam, an important Islamic values is a self-acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and then subsequent confession, tawbah, to God. In Al-Imran, verse 135 states, quote, there are also the ones who, when they have committed a shameful deed or wrong themselves through any kind of sinful act, immediately remember God and implore Him to forgive their sin, unquote. If a person does not acknowledge his or her misconduct or wrongdoing, it is unlikely for that person to correct that mistake and prevent himself from repeating the same mistake again. With the same logic, how can we establish peace while we still engage in fighting? How can we become brothers and sisters while we still cannot reconcile our differences or conflicts? Therefore, we need to re-emphasize a basic values of Islam, that is, self-criticism, in our Muslim community. Self-criticism will help us to review our thinking and conducts to determine whether it is in line with the teachings of Allah. To me, self-criticism is the first step of problem solving. The first step is important to solve all problems. Many Muslims, I believe, would defend their fighting by referring to the injustice they received. According to Al-Baqarah, verse 194, Islam allows retaliation in the case of wrong as a principle of law. For justice requires that the inviolate values demand equal respect and retaliation. At the same time, the Quran advises us to forgive an evil done to ourselves. Al-Ma'idah, verse 45 states, quote, as we prescribe for them in it concerning murder, a life for a life, and an eye for an eye, and a nose for a nose, and an ear for an ear, and a tooth for a tooth, and a like retaliation for all wounds, the exact retaliation of which to possible. But whoever remits the retaliation, it will be an act of expiation for him. Whoever does not judge by what God has sent down, those are indeed wrongdoers, unquote. In other words, retaliation is based on absolute justice and equalities of rights. However, in reality, such retaliation can easily exceed its limits, which could in turn generate an endless retaliation. The Quran, to me, encourages people to forego retaliation, and Allah will reward such person at the end. As Ali Unal explained, quote, "A person who saves the life of another shall be considered as having saved the life of all mankind. In the same way, if a person has the right to demand retaliation for a murder but forgoes it, they will gain as great a reward as if they have forgiven the whole humankind, or they will have their sins forgiven to that extent," unquote. Thus, to my understanding of Islam, forgiveness is more important than retaliation. Forgiveness and reconciliation will push the problem solving a step further. According to Al-Baqarah, verse 155, Allah tests our perseverance and patience in many occasions in our life. Quote, "We will certainly test you with something of fear and hunger, and loss of wealth, and lives, and fruits earnings. But give glad tidings to the persevering and patient," unquote. As Ali Unal explained this verse as follows, quote, "The main purpose of testing is to mature and perfect the believers, both as individuals and as a community, purify them, distinguish the true believers among them from the hypocritical ones, develop their capacities, prepare them for the future, and make them worthy of paradise," unquote. According to my experiences, forgiveness and reconciliation may run into obstacles and problems. The concerned parties must hold their perseverance and tolerance at a high level. Thus, perseverance and tolerance are complementary values to forgiveness and reconciliation. Through this logic, perseverance and tolerance are a test of God on us in order to develop ourselves to be a perfect human being. Quote, "Islam aims to develop human beings from being potentially human to being truly human, thus perfecting them. It develops the human character in the best way," unquote. This is the beauty of Islam that I appreciate, and that touches my heart. Forgiveness and reconciliation, as well as perseverance, and tolerance are preconditions of peace and harmony. Al-Imran, verse 103, command the words of Allah as follows, quote, and hold fast altogether to the rope of God, and never be divided. Remember God's favor upon you. You were once enemy, and He reconciled your hearts, so that through His favor you become like brothers, unquote. And Al-Hujurat, verse 10, further explained this point, quote, the believers are but brothers, so make peace between your brothers and keep from disobedience to God in reverence for Him and piety, particularly in your duties towards one another as brother, so that you may be shown mercy, unquote. The Quran has called for unity and peace among Muslims throughout the book, so many times. Allah gives us free will to learn how to live together in peace and harmony among the diversity of our global communities. As further explained this point in Al-Hujurat, verse 13, quote, O humankind, surely we have created you from a single pair of males and female, made you into tribes and families, so that you may know one another, and so build mutuality and cooperative relationships, so that you may take pride in your differences of race or social rank and breed enmities, unquote. To my understandings, these words indicates positive and constructive aspects of diversity among human beings. This diverse community will help us to pursue the straight path. This diversity of living circumstances will test our faith through our tongue, through our body, and through our heart, whether we are on God's side or side on side. On the other side, this verse also ensures an equality of human beings, regardless of their race or colors of their skins. A hadith by Ibn Hanbal confirms that no Arab is superior to non-Arab, and no white person is superior to a black person. This means that superiority is not by birth or by color, but by righteousness and devotion to God. The honors of a person is not measured by his wealth, rich or poor, but rather by how he lives his life according to the Quran and the Sunnah. To me, unity and peace are not only an important value, but also essential goal of Islam. Unfortunately, contemporary realities seem to contradict these words of Al-Hujurat. At this point, may I ask, do some of our Muslim brothers truly follow the words of God and the practice of the Prophet Muhammad? Do they still believe in the justice in the world hereafter? Islam, to me, teaches Muslims to believe that Allah will always give them the final justice. As the An-Nisa, verse 59 says, quote, "And if you are dispute among yourselves and about anything, refer it to God and the messenger. If indeed you believe in God and in the last day, it is the best for you and fairest at the end," unquote. Therefore, all human beings have to take full responsibilities of their deeds, and this responsibility will be accounted as their final justice of each particular person, as stated in the An-Najm, quote, "That no soul, no bearers of burden, bears, and is made to bear the burdens of another, and that human as only that for which he labors, and his labor will be brought to be seen," unquote. Up to this point, I have discussed 4 basic Islamic values as follows. First, self-criticism and self-acknowledgement of wrongdoing as the first step towards problem solving. Second, forgiveness and reconciliation as a path towards equality and justice. Third, perseverance and tolerance in practicing a true Islam. And fourth, unity and peace among Muslim and between Muslim and non-Muslim. According to the Quran, these 4 basic values of Islam serve as practical tools in pursuing the straight path. And the applications of these 4 values have to be balanced, wasatiyah, under different circumstances. In other words, they have to be kept at the center of Islam, not at the periphery. Moderation is indeed an important core aspect of Islam. I truly believe that. Excellencies, distinguished scholars, ladies and gentlemen, now may I turn to an issue on how to promote and applications of these 4 basic values among Muslim and between Muslim and non-Muslims. First, I believe that we need to go back to the Quran and Sunnah. We must try to understand the true nature of Islam and the nature of true Islam through the Quran and Sunnah. We must try to comprehend the pure and complete text of the Quran. And equally important, we must try to understand how Prophet Muhammad applies the Quran to his living reality under the various circumstances. Through this comprehension and understanding of the text and its application methodology, our interpretation of the text on contemporary circumstances will be coherent to the nature of true Islam. I am confident that Prophet Muhammad, through his Sunnah, intends to show us how to use the Quran to manage his community towards unity and peace, not conflict and war. Thus, we must try to understand the purity and completeness of the Quran and Sunnah. Second, we need to communicate among Muslim and between Muslim and non-Muslim at all levels, i.e., from individual, institution, community, country, to global level, It is our common duty and responsibility to promote and support such dialogue and exchange of facts, ideas, and opinions between engaged parties. This interface will help reduce biases, misunderstanding, and skepticism of non-Muslim toward Muslim, and vice versa. As a consequence, it will help to create understanding and trust between them, hopefully leading to tolerance and forgiveness among them. Acceptance, respect, honoring of different ideas and opinions are essential values of human beings to live together in peace and harmony in this diverse global community. When peace and harmonies are achieved in our society, human beings can use their wisdoms and capabilities granted by Allah to build progress, security, and prosperity for themselves, their families, and communities. Eventually, human beings who hold different faith, belief, and culture will be able to coexist in peace and harmony. According to Muslim belief and faith, human beings, Muslim and non-Muslim, are all created by Allah. This Islamic principle is very much supportive to an interfaith and intercultural dialogue because actions of Muslim and non-Muslim will finally be witnessed and judged by Allah. Third, as a non-Muslim, I ask myself as follows: do we, non-Muslim, hear what Muslim hear? Do we, non-Muslim, see what Muslims see? And do we, non-Muslim, feel what Muslims feel? If we, non-Muslim, hear, see, and feel the same as Muslim hear, see, and feel, we will certainly treat and interact with Muslim differently from what we did. These are my sincere questions and remarks to all non-Muslim, including myself. Muslims and non-Muslims need not to agree in all issues, but we would wish that we will agree on principal issues, usul, and we may disagree on peripheral issues, furu. Then we can work together toward peace and unity on those shared topics such as self-criticism, forgiveness and reconciliation, perseverance and tolerance, unity and peace. I am confident that these values are commonly shared by Muslim and non-Muslims alike. On the opposite, we may hold many differences, such as colors of skin, history, language, and culture. But those differences should not prevent us from using our common values and principles to build our future together. Therefore, I would encourage us all here to open our heart to hear, to see, and to feel our common values and principles. We need to work together on our commonalities and keep our differences aside, at least for now. Then we will be able to expand our common areas. and reduce space of our different areas. As a consequence, we will have more space and time for peace and harmony in this global community. Excellencies, distinguished scholars, and my dear friends, in conclusion, may I recall to my quotations at the beginning of my talk, namely, guide us to the straight path. Idina Sirat Mustaqim. And quote, we have made you a middle way community. Wakasa Liga Ya'aunakum Ummatan Wasaton. Now, you may observe that all of my remarks are reflections of my understanding of these two important Quranic verses. I have to admit that these two verses have a strong impact on my personal thinking on Islam and my interaction with Islamic community and friends. These two verses, to me, give a light of peace and harmony, not only among Muslim Ummah, but also between Muslim and non-Muslim communities. When we look back to our human history, we always observed a fight between the good and the evil as a central part of human civilization. And the result of the fighting in a particular period of our history certainly indicates the rise or the decline of human society in that period. When the good governs a particular period of human history, the human civilization will rise. On the opposite, when the evil rules any period of human history, the human civilization will decline. Through our cooperative efforts and determination in this contemporary period, starting as a small step from this particular conference onward, I'm confident that the good will prevail over the evil, and our destiny will be eventually be judged by Allah. Last but not least, may I take this opportunity to thank the organizing committee to give me, as a non-Muslim, an opportunity to share my thoughts in this very distinguished and prestigious international conference, particularly at this closing remark session. I am also would like to thank you all for kindly listening patiently to my limited understanding and humble interpretation of Islam and its application to the contemporary global situations. Alhamdulillah, walabit tawfiq wal hidayah. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Kanok Wongtrangan, for this conference.